Get my 6. Great sun positioning. Should be pretty easy to tell if someone or something walks through there, huh? And I'm not going to get caught up on eating my wife's delicious peanuts during this video because I owe you this. Yeah, they are delicious and they are available on our Etsy store. The link is in the description box below. But I got sidetracked the other day because I was supposed to tell you a story I'd recently heard that I believe I've heard before. I'm not quite so sure if this story is urban legend that's been passed down for centuries or if it's based on real events and it's maybe twisted or taken on maybe a few different appendages over the years. But I'm going to tell you the version I heard, and you can think what you want of it for yourself. It's pretty creepy. It's a story. The setting is like somewhere right around here somewhere. You know, we're just outside of Charlottesville here in Central Virginia. And it involves the hat of a Union soldier from the Civil War. And it involves the soldier that wore the hat to a degree. Perhaps the ghost of the soldier that wore the hat. And it involves the Confederate soldier who shot and killed this Union soldier during a battle during the Civil War, somewhere right around here. The way I heard it told was that there is a Civil War artifact collector that lives somewhere between here and Richmond, somewhere between Charlottesville and Richmond, along the banks of the James River, and he is currently in possession of this hat. It's been passed down through his family's lineage since the time of the Civil War. To my understanding, the man's great-great-great-grandfather was a Confederate officer and actually got the hat after the Confederate soldier was shot and killed up in Gettysburg, up in Pennsylvania. So here's the story. The story was of this Confederate soldier, young man, 19, 20 years old, who was good-humored in nature. He was the kind of guy, and a lot of you were in the military, a lot of you were veterans, and you can appreciate a guy like this. I know when I was in the Army and when I was in Iraq, there were guys who were just, could always lighten the mood. You know, you're worried every day that you might not see the next day. And, but there's always that one guy who's got a great sense of humor, who can bring levity into a oftentimes terrifying situation. Well, that kind of is who this Confederate soldier was. He was a young man from the South. He really, the way I heard the story, he wasn't really concerned with the government and what was going on. He wasn't a big supporter of slavery or any of that kind of thing. But when he felt that his homeland was being attacked, he felt that it was time for him to put down the plow and take to arms and defend his home. So that's why he enlisted. They say that he was a crack shot. I mean, when this guy fired his weapon, he didn't miss. Once he took aim, he didn't miss. And he had what could be called perhaps veins of ice. Ice water ran through his veins. They used to say that about Jack Nicholson, the golfer. Another athlete that comes to mind is Joe Montana. You remember the drive. That's what they call it. The final drive of the Super Bowl. I forget which one. It's back in the 80s. The 49ers, I think, were down by 5 points. They got the ball with less than a minute to go. Joe Montana's driving his team down the field. And, I mean, they're in the red zone, and there's just a few seconds left, and they're in the huddle, and everybody's looking at Joe Montana like, what do we do? What do we do? And he's just kind of glaring off into the the stands like this. Everybody's looking at him, and they're wondering what he's thinking. Here it is. The play of a lifetime is coming up. Whatever he calls determines whether or not they win the Super Bowl or lose by mere 5 points. So they're looking at him. He's looking off into the stands, and he goes, "Hey, is that John Candy over there?" So everybody in the huddle looks over, and sure enough, John Candy was sitting there watching the Super Bowl. And they were like, "Yeah, Joe, what's the play?" And he's like, oh yeah, okay. And he calls out the play, executes the play perfectly, and the 49ers win the Super Bowl. That's an example of what is meant by, somebody that has ice running through their veins. They just don't choke. They don't, freak out and lose it all there at the most important moment. Well, that kind of defines the Civil War soldier. In the heat of battle, this Confederate soldier, in the heat of battle, guys, that's odd. Do you see something like right here? That's not on my phone. That's weird. That's really weird. Could that be a spirit? Huh. No, it's still there. That's weird. I don't know what that is. Okay. So, daggone orbs distracting me from my story. Where was I? Gotta get some of these peanuts. They're awesome. And the girl makes them cute. So anyway, they're in the heat of battle down here in Virginia somewhere, and everybody's taking cover, and they're, it would be idiotic to say they're fighting as if their lives depended on it, because their lives did depend upon it. This guy, man, he would just stand out there in the open and take aim at the enemy, and he noticed there was another guy so much like him on the other side during this battle. It was a Union soldier doing the same thing. While all the Union soldiers are taking cover, trying not to get shot while they're shooting at the Confederate soldiers, there's this one guy and his hat's on sideways, kind of like this. He's just picking off Confederate soldiers, standing out in the open like nobody's business. So this Confederate soldier, and his nerves of steel, his veins with ice water flowing through them, he takes aim, and he shoots, and he hits that cat right in the forehead right there, right in the middle of the head, puts a hole through his hat, comes out the other side. Well, sadly, one of the gruesome parts of war is that there are those in it who will take trophies, and that's what this Confederate soldier did. He, when everything was over, battle was over, he went out to where the body of the Union soldier he'd shot right through the head, right through the hat, lay, and he took that hat and he used it as, that was a war trophy. So as the war progressed and as they saw more action, his unit, this Confederate soldier and his unit, not unlike a lot of folks in that situation, they started losing their minds, and he retained his nerves of steel, and ice water continued to flow through his veins, but he started losing his mind as well. And one of the things that he would do is he would get that hat out when they were in camp, and he'd wear it all sideways. Well, it appeared as if he would wear it sideways, like the guy that he had shot always was wearing it at the time that he shot him. But the thing of it was, every time he put it on like this. He'd put it on, he'd go sit down around the fire with his buddies, and 2 or 3 minutes would pass, and then they would realize he was wearing it sideways. But nobody noticed him actually moving it. So they thought it was some kind of prank or some kind of trick he was doing, and they were like, come on, man, you're starting to freak us out. I mean, we know we're doing what's got to be done, but we're to the point to where it's gotten old. We're not enjoying it. And you're not helping doing that creepy thing with that hat. And he says, I'm not doing any creepy thing with this hat. And he, after 2 or 3 times this happened, he said, look, I'll prove it to you. So he put his hat on, didn't touch it. He just sat there and everybody watched him. And after about a minute had gone by, they could tell it had twisted a little bit. About another minute, about like that, another minute went by. But after about 3 or 4 minutes, that hat would end up being sideways, just like it was on the head of the Union soldier when he had been shot. Right through the center, and the hole was still there. So, they were really getting creeped out. They were begging him to stop doing it. And he would just do it more, and he'd laugh at him. He'd say, wow, you guys go out there into battle every time we have a battle, maybe not every day, but a couple days a week. You guys are getting shot at, cannon fire's coming your way, and you guys are brave enough to go out there and do that, but you're scared of me and my hat? And they were like, yeah, man, because, I mean, guns, rifles, cannons, all that stuff is of this world, and we can see it. But this supernatural stuff, this paranormal stuff, that just shouldn't be messed around with. That shouldn't be played with. Well, he claimed it wasn't him, but they were convinced it was a trick. So they go up to Gettysburg, and they get in that fierce battle. Tens of thousands of lives lost, tens of thousands of casualties. And the guy, he's doing what he always does, standing out in the open. But by this time, he's taken to wearing this hat. And he's wearing it sideways, even though it's a Union hat, and he's a Confederate soldier. And during the battle, he takes a bullet. And he takes a bullet right through the exact same hole that he had put in that hat when he shot the Union soldier through the hat and through the head. Exact same spot. Not right beside it, not just above it, but just right through it. Killed him, as you could imagine. It was the end of his days. So somebody in his unit took the hat, and the story by this time about this hat had spread along the soldiers on both the Confederate side and the Union side. And so therefore a very high-ranking Confederate officer confiscated this hat, of course, to be his war trophy. And now, as I heard the story told to me last week from a buddy of mine, that hat is still in the family of the Confederate officer that confiscated it. So the officer heard so many stories about this hat. He was determined to find out how the Confederate soldier was doing it. How was it that he could put it on his head and get it to turn sideways? Because this guy couldn't do it. He put it on his head and it just stayed there. So the lore was that this Confederate soldier's days were numbered from the day that he shot and killed that Union soldier. He was a marked man, and the ghost of that Union soldier was coming after him. And he was giving him subtle hints like this by turning his hat sideways. Well, since it wouldn't turn sideways on the head of the officer, he was convinced it was just a prank because he didn't believe in superstition and hocus pocus and urban legends and all this stuff. So he set out to find out the true story of this hat. And he started making contacts of people he knew from the war. Now, this was years after the war was over. He started contacting some of the Union officers to find out if they knew the guy who the hat had belonged to originally and what was his story. I mean, did his family come from, did they practice hocus pocus, witchcraft, anything like this? Nothing came other than more stories. He would receive thought I heard a howl. Keep watching. Keep getting my 6, particularly up in this area. If anybody's noticed something moving around up here, timestamp it. We might have company. They probably smell these totally awesome peanuts. Look at that. I have it open. Miss Dearly's Bonite Adobo, Filipino peanut adobo. Adobo peanuts are delicious. Get them from our Etsy store. The link's in the description box below. I'm saying that's the 3rd time I've said it. People have complained about that. I don't get this. When you watch my YouTube videos, there's other ads. Why can't I get my own? Huh? So anyway, the Confederate officer determined that, well, it was all just rumors. stories, they become fanatical, especially during times of war. I mean, some of the stories, have you read Olive Capri? I mean, you can get it in print with my autograph from our Etsy store as well. I know you're going there to buy peanuts, get a copy. There's some stories in there about stuff that we experienced in Iraq. That book's written as fiction. As I always say, good luck finding the parts that aren't real. So anyway, so you got to say it's fiction or people will say you're crazy if you claim these things really happened. You're just a nutcase, crazy war vet, you know? So you got to say, oh, this is fiction. Don't worry about it. Some people just can't handle the truth. So the guy determined it was just stories that are brought up during times of war. He was convinced that the guy had somehow put, you know how these hats have like buttons on them here? The one on the inside of that hat seemed a little bit different than most. And he's convinced that the guy messed around with the button enough to where he could put it on his head. And if he tilted his head a certain way, that it would just by default spin that way. And then he had spent hours practicing how to do this. And that's why I did it. He was convinced. That's all there was to it. Well, about a month after he had come to this conclusion and all the communications he had requested about the hat had finished coming in, he got another communication. One last communication had been tied up in the mail. I mean, you think the mail sucks now. It probably really sucked back then. Probably sucks more now. But anyway, he received a letter from a young man who was battle buddies with the Union soldier that was the owner of the hat before he was shot and killed by the Confederate soldier. And in the letter, he said that he experienced something very odd at Gettysburg when the Confederate soldier that shot and killed the Union soldier in a previous battle was shot and killed himself. Okay, the guy said in his letter that him and a couple of his other battle buddies could see this Confederate soldier just standing up there, cool as a cucumber, with his hat on sideways in the open field, just picking off Union soldiers like nobody's business. Doing it while not taking cover. He didn't care to be out in the open. It's like he had no fear. And so this guy who had sent the letter and his battle buddy said, let's get this guy. We're going to take him out right now. They trained their rifles on him, but before they could pull their triggers, they heard a shot come from behind them, and then they saw the Confederate soldier who was wearing a hat fall. This is when he had been shot right through the same hole, right through the head, and was killed. So this guy and his battle buddies turned around to look to see who had fired the shot, and there was no one there. There's no one there. And he said in his letter, in his conclusion, and this is the creepiest part of this story, that the shot had a very odd sound to it. And it had the same sound that the rifle that their battle buddy, the original owner of the hat, who was shot and killed by the Confederate soldier, the same sound his rifle used to make. Said it had a very strange squeal to it. It always sounded as if his powder was a little bit wet. Now, it wasn't. His powder was always dry. They could never figure out why it made that sound. But his rifle had a very unique, very specific sound. And that was the exact sound that they heard fired behind them when they were getting ready to take out this Confederate soldier, which they didn't need to do because the shot that came from behind them did the work for them. But when they turned around, no one was there. It's a pretty creepy story, and I thought it would be one that would be appropriate for you guys because I know a lot of folks mention in the comments that at times they believe they see Civil War soldiers, the ghosts of Civil War soldiers walking around in the background. And we've found grape shot here on this property, planting trees. A lot of antiques around here are found from the Civil War. A lot of battles took place around here. But after hearing that story, I'm kind of convinced that some of what you might be seeing might not be remnants of deceased Confederate soldiers. It's probably just as many remnants of Northern soldiers around here as well. I'm convinced of that even more so after hearing that story. So thanks for being here with me for another story. If you liked it, I hope you tune in next time for more. Probably be out here again tomorrow, and hopefully it's just a little bit warmer, if I am. What a beautiful sunset. It's just too beautiful to just stop the video right now, isn't it? So I'm going to do it the proper way. I'm going to give this sunset the proper ending it deserves by walking off into it while eating my beautiful bride dearly, aka Giggly Girl's delicious Adobo peanuts. and of course, staying hydrated. See you for more next time.